There are few things more peaceful than fishing off my own dock on a quiet Saturday morning. Until your HOA president's brat decides to use it as his personal diving board. I just settled into my chair, coffee in hand, line in the water, when a loud splash nearly knocked my tackle box into the lake. I turned, and there he was, some shaggy-haired teenager in neon swim trunks, cannonballing off my dock like it was a county pool. "Hey," I shouted, standing up. "This isn't public property, off the dock." The kid wiped the water from his face and blinked at me like I'd just interrupted his birthday party. "My mom said I can use it. She's the HOA president." "I don't care if she's president of the United States," I snapped. "You're trespassing." "Get off." He huffed and mumbled something under his breath, then climbed out and stomped up the hill toward his house. I knew exactly who his mom was: Penelope Oakley. 50-something, bleach blonde bob, and the personality of a malfunctioning blender. She'd been on a power trip since the day she got elected HOA president, and she ran the board like her own little kingdom. I didn't think much more of it. I went back to fishing, until the next morning. I stepped outside just after sunrise and nearly dropped my thermos. There, at the edge of the lake, was Penelope's brand new white BMW SUV floating. Well, half floating. The rear half was already submerged, sinking slowly into the muddy water near the community boat ramp. Algae clung to the bumper. One of her fancy hubcaps bobbed nearby like a sad chrome lily pad. I stood there blinking, trying to wrap my head around what I was seeing. Then I heard the shrieking. Penelope was running down the hill in a pink bathrobe and designer slippers, hair in curlers, screaming like someone had shot her. "My car, my car." Who did this? I walked down the path toward the ramp, sipping my coffee like it was just another peaceful morning. "Good morning, Penelope," I said. "Lovely day for a swim," her face twisted like she'd bitten into a lemon. "You think this is funny?" "Someone pushed my car into the lake." "I'd start by asking your son," I said. "He seemed pretty upset yesterday when I asked him to stay off my dock." "You have no right to speak to him that way." "That dock is community property." "No, Penelope," I said, pulling out the deed from my hoodie pocket. "It's not." Her eyes narrowed as I handed her a copy of the property map, clearly showing the dock was on my lot, not common land. She snatched it like it burned her hand. "You'll be hearing from the board," she hissed. "Great," I said. "I'll be sure to bring this copy with me." She stormed off toward her sinking BMW, shouting into the wind like it owed her an explanation. But I wasn't laughing, not yet, because something about that car being in the lake felt off. Too convenient, too dramatic. And when I checked my security camera footage later that night, what I saw made my jaw tighten. It wasn't her son. It was her. I leaned forward in my desk chair, watching the timestamp on the video. The camera I'd mounted under the eaves of my boathouse caught the whole thing just after midnight. Penelope's car crept down the gravel path behind the boat ramp, headlights off. A few seconds later, the driver's side door opened. There she was, hunched and moving fast, her robe flapping like a cape in the wind. She paused at the edge of the ramp, stepped out without shutting the door, and gave the vehicle a shove. It barely budged. She tried again, this time throwing her shoulder into the frame like she was pushing a grocery cart with a stuck wheel. It took her 3 tries. On the third push, the car's tires hit the slick algae at the water's edge. It rolled forward slowly at first, then picked up speed, gliding silently into the lake until the back end dipped under and the front lights fizzled out like dying fireflies. She stood there, watching for a long while, then turned and walked back up the hill without a word. I sat back, heart pounding, not out of fear but disbelief. She'd done it herself, on purpose. I rewound the tape, checked the angle, the lighting, everything. No doubt, that wasn't some petty vandalism or teenage tantrum. She staged it, and then blamed me. By noon, I was already back from the sheriff's office. I handed over a flash drive with the footage, along with a short written statement. Officer Dwyer didn't say much, just scribbled in his notepad, eyes narrowing when he paused the video at the moment Penelope leaned into the bumper. He didn't need convincing. The evidence spoke louder than either of us. That afternoon, I got a knock at the door. Not the sheriff this time, someone slicker. Mr. Langford. The man adjusted the collar of his navy windbreaker and flashed a badge. Detective Rio's County Property Crimes Division. You got a minute? I stepped aside and let him in. He didn't waste time with small talk. Mind if I ask how your relationship is with Penelope Oakley? Cordial, I said. In the way a fox and a hen might be cordial if they were forced to share a yard. He cracked a dry grin. She told Dispatch this morning that you threatened her son yesterday, that you were aggressive. Hostile said she feared for her safety. She say that before or after she tried to frame me for sinking her car, I handed him another copy of the footage, burned to a disk. He popped it into his laptop right there on my kitchen counter. As the video played, he didn't blink once. At the end, he exhaled slowly and closed the screen. Well, that changes things. What happens now depends, he said, on whether she sticks to her story or folds when we confront her. But if she tries to press false charges against you, and we've got this. That's fraud, misuse of emergency services, property insurance scam. If she filed a claim, she did, I interrupted. I saw the adjuster out there 2 hours after the tow truck, he nodded. Then she's real deep. A few hours later, the squad car pulled into her driveway. I didn't have to watch, I knew they'd be showing her the same footage. But curiosity got the better of me, so I took a walk around the block and happened to pass by as the officers were talking to her at the door. She was red-faced, arms crossed, barking rapid sentences with a voice that cracked halfway through. Her son hovered behind her, eyes wide and pale. When she spotted me walking by, her face twisted with something that wasn't anger, something far less stable. The next morning, the notice came. A letter, hand-delivered by one of the HOA board members, a wiry man named Calvin who always wore polos a size too small. He looked uncomfortable handing it to me. Penelope insisted it be delivered in person, he muttered, avoiding my eyes. I opened it on the porch. The letter was typed in bold font, and the language was pure theater accusations of hostile behavior, emotional disturbance, and creating an unsafe environment for other residents. At the bottom was a demand. I was to remove my dock within 7 days or face fines of up to $500 per day. I laughed loudly. Calvin flinched. You know this is nonsense, right? I said. He rubbed his neck. She said it was a violation of the amended bylaws. Which amendment? Article 11, I think. I pulled out my phone and opened the scanned copy of the HOA bylaws. No Article 11 existed. The document ended at Article 10. I held the screen up. Want to show me where it says that? He took one look and deflated like a cheap balloon. I'll talk to the rest of the board, he mumbled, then hurried down the steps. The next 3 days were quiet, too quiet. No patrols from Penelope, no snotty letters, no HOA emails about unsanctioned flower beds or barbecue smoke. But I wasn't fooled. I knew silence was her regrouping. On the 4th day, I got a visit from a woman named Marla, used to be the treasurer before Penelope forced her off the board last year. She met me on the edge of my lawn, looking over her shoulder twice before speaking. I heard what happened. With the car and the fake amendment, I nodded. You still have access to the old HOA records. She pulled a flash drive from her purse. Everything from the last 10 years. Meeting minutes, votes, proposed bylaw changes, everything. That night, I stayed up past midnight combing through the files. What I found made my fingers go cold. Penelope had faked more than one amendment. At least 3 different versions of the HOA bylaws existed, each nearly identical but containing small, strategic changes, most of them giving her expanded power to issue fines, restrict property use, and dissolve committee votes. The metadata on the documents showed clear edits always from the same laptop, always after the board meetings had ended. She'd been rewriting the rulebook behind everyone's back. The next morning, I contacted a retired judge who lived 2 streets over Judge Harlan, a gruff old man who'd spent 4 decades on the bench before moving out here for peace and quiet. I showed him the documents. He whistled low and slow. She's cooked, he said. That's document tampering and misrepresentation of governance. If she issued fines or made decisions based on these forgeries, she's legally liable. Think the board will believe it, he smirked. They'll believe it when I present it at the emergency meeting I just requested. 2 days later, the community center was packed. Penelope sat at the head of the long, folding table, arms crossed, Her son slouched beside her. The board members fidgeted with papers and avoided eye contact. I stood at the front of the room with Judge Harlan and Marla beside me. Judge Harlan stepped forward. "These documents," he said, holding up a thick folder, "contain evidence that the sitting HOA president has made unauthorized and fraudulent edits to the governing bylaws of this neighborhood. These changes were not voted on, not recorded in any legitimate minutes, and were used to enforce fines and regulations that never legally existed." Gasps rippled through the room. A few board members flipped through their copies, eyes widening as they compared versions. Calvin looked like he might faint. Penelope stood, voice trembling. "This is a witch hunt. These accusations are baseless. That man," she pointed at me, "has been harassing my family and threatening my child." Judge Harlan didn't blink. "The sheriff's department reviewed the security footage, ma'am. You staged the destruction of your own vehicle and attempted to blame your neighbor. That's not harassment, it's obstruction and fraud." The room fell silent. Then someone in the back, an older woman I didn't recognize, stood up and said, "I want to vote for her removal. Right now." And just like that, hands started going up, one by one. A few hesitant at first, then more confident by the time it was over. Only Penelope and her son's hands remained down. She stormed out without a word, and as she passed me, I met her eyes, not with anger, not with triumph, but with the calm, steady gaze of someone who knew the rules and played by them better than she ever could. Penelope didn't show her face for 3 weeks after the vote. Her porch lights stayed off. The blinds in every window were drawn like a bunker. The only sign of life was the occasional glimpse of her son dragging the trash can back up the drive, head down, earbuds in, barely more than a shadow. It would have been easy to let it lie, to enjoy the peace and let the mess fade like a bad smell. But I knew better. People like Penelope didn't retreat out of shame. They retreated to plot. And sure enough, the first crack came during the monthly budget meeting. It was Calvin again, standing at the front of the community hall, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt. "We've encountered some irregularities," he said, fumbling with a stack of printed spreadsheets. "Specifically with the landscaping fund and vendor payments over the last fiscal year." Someone in the back barked, "Define irregularities." Calvin licked his lips and tapped a page. "Well, according to our books, we paid Redstone Groundskeeping $32,000 last year. But when I asked for an invoice breakdown, they said they only billed us for 19. Murmurs rolled through the room like a rising tide. I raised my hand. "And who authorized the payments?" He shifted from foot to foot. "All of them were signed by Penelope. She added herself to the finance subcommittee last spring." Judge Harlan stood slowly from his seat near the wall. "You have copies of those checks," Calvin nodded, "stamped with her signature. Some have notes in the memo lines. Emergency irrigation, storm cleanup, but there weren't any storms last year." The murmurs turned to sharp whispers. I didn't say anything. I just watched as the board members turned those pages over in their hands, eyes widening with every line. That night, I got a call from Marla. Her voice was tight. "We need to talk. I found something." She came by half an hour later with a worn accordion folder under her arm. Inside were printed emails from the old HOA account she'd kept access to by accident. Most were routine pest control schedules, holiday event planning, boring stuff, but one thread stood out. A chain between Penelope and a man named Travis Rollins, owner of Redstone Groundskeeping, the subject line. "Split confirmed." The messages were short and casual. No formal greetings, just lines like "same percentage as last time," and "need it by Friday or Calvin might notice." One included a scanned copy of a check made out to TR Properties, which was not a registered vendor with the HOA. I blinked. "She paid him from HOA dues and he kicked back a cut." Marla nodded. "At least $13,000 over 6 months, and that's just what I found." By morning, the sheriff's department had a full report from me and Marla, complete with timelines, vendor statements, and copies of the emails. Detective Rios didn't need convincing this time. He was already opening a file. That afternoon, a pair of cruisers pulled into Penelope's driveway. She didn't come out until they rang the bell twice. No bathrobe this time. She wore a stiff blazer and clutched a leather-bound planner to her chest like a life preserver. From across the street, I watched her try to explain something, arms gesturing wide, voice rising. Then one deputy stepped forward, spoke quietly, and turned her around. They cuffed her right there on the porch. The neighborhood was quiet as she was led down the path, shoes clicking on the concrete. Her son wasn't home to see it. Maybe that was for the best. Later that week, Judge Harlan called a special meeting not for the HOA but for the residents. No agenda, no motions, just an open forum at the community center. People showed up in droves. Couples with strollers, retirees in lawn chairs, teenagers hanging by the door like they were watching a school play. Harlan stood at the front, arms folded, and let the room settle before speaking. "We've seen what happens when oversight fails," he said. "But this community isn't broken, it's just been misled." He opened the floor and stories poured out. One woman described being fined for painting her shutters a color not listed in any official guidelines. A veteran in the corner raised his hand and said his service flag had been labeled visual clutter and forcibly removed from his porch. A young couple confessed they'd been threatened with foreclosure over a late fee that Penelope had tripled without explanation. Each story came with dates, photos, and copies of letters. Marla collected everything. The pile grew taller with each speaker. Then I stepped up. "I've lived here 10 years, I said, "and I watched this neighborhood go from a community to a fiefdom. She didn't just break rules, she invented them. She didn't just misuse funds, she laundered them. She didn't just trespass, she tried to frame me for a crime." No one interrupted, not even the teens by the door. We can't fix everything overnight, but we can start by knowing who we're trusting with power. And making sure we never hand it to someone who thinks governance means control. The clapping started slow, then it spread. Not polite applause, real, grounded approval. People stood, heads nodded, some faces were wet. The next Monday, we formed a temporary oversight council. 3 volunteers from the neighborhood, plus 1 external legal advisor, someone Judge Harlan trusted from his years on the bench. Their job was simple: audit everything. Every fine, every vendor, every meeting minute since Penelope took over. By Thursday, they'd frozen the HOA's bank account. A week later, the audit uncovered a second shell company. Not just Redstone groundskeeping, Penelope had also created a fake pest control vendor registered under her maiden name. Nearly $9,000 had been funneled through it under the guise of monthly treatments no one ever saw. Detective Rios called me again that weekend. "She's not talking," he said. But her contractor flipped. "Rollins gave us everything: emails, bank transfers, even the original agreement they signed." He didn't laugh. He sounded tired. "This is bigger than we thought. She's looking at felony fraud, wire fraud, and possibly conspiracy." I asked about her son. "Not part of it," he said. "We checked. He's clean. Looks like she kept him in the dark." Good. The kid had enough to deal with. In the weeks that followed, the board was rebuilt from scratch. No more closed-door votes. No more mysterious fines. Every decision had to be posted online and confirmed in open meetings. We rewrote the bylaws from the ground up with input from every homeowner who showed up. The dock stayed exactly where it belonged. One Saturday, a month after the arrest, I was back in my chair, line in the water, coffee steaming in the morning light. A new neighbor, Dennis from Lot 12, walked down the path and stopped a few feet away. "Mind if I watch?" he asked. "Pull up a stump," I said. He sat quiet for a while. Then he said, "I heard about what you did, all of it." I shrugged. "Did what anyone would do?" "No," he said. "You did what most people wouldn't. And because of that, this place feels like a neighborhood again." Neither of us said anything more after that. The lake was calm. The sun was just starting to cut through the mist. I reeled in my line, cast again, and waited, not for trouble, just for fish. 3 months passed. The neighborhood had changed visibly and permanently. The tension that used to hang over the cul-de-sac like wet laundry had lifted. People waved again. Kids rode their bikes without being reminded of invisible noise ordinances. And on the second Saturday of August, we held the first community picnic in over 4 years. The HOA, now under an interim council, handled everything openly. No secret ballots, no forced dues hikes. Just a giant potluck under the oaks near the playground. Someone brought a grill, someone else brought a live band, and for the first time in years, nobody was afraid to laugh too loudly. I stood near the lake with Judge Harlan, paper plate in hand, watching a group of toddlers chase bubbles across the grass. "Hard to believe this used to be a battleground," I said. He nodded, chewing thoughtfully. "Amazing how quickly people remember their neighbors when they're no longer being ruled." Before I could respond, a familiar sedan rolled slowly down the hill and parked near the far edge of the lot. The driver's door opened. Penelope's son stepped out. He looked older, somehow shoulders straighter, jaw set. A woman followed him from the passenger seat. Early 40s, business attire, no makeup. She carried a folder and a cautious expression. I handed my plate to Harlan and walked over. The boys saw me first and stopped halfway across the lawn. The woman placed a hand on his back and gave him a gentle nudge before stepping forward. "Mr. Langford," she asked. I nodded. "I'm Dana Keller. I represent Jacob's interests and his well-being, legally speaking. He's been placed in the care of his aunt in Raleigh, but he asked to come today." He wanted to say something. I glanced at the kid. His face was pale but steady. "I don't hold anything against him," I said. "He was a kid caught in the storm." "Even so," she replied, "he has the right to speak for himself." Jacob stepped forward. "I didn't know what she was doing," he said. "I didn't know about the money or the fake rules or the stuff with the car. I thought she just wanted to keep the neighborhood nice. That's what she always said, that everything she did was to keep it nice." He looked at the lake, then back at me. "I'm sorry I jumped off your dock." "I shouldn't have, and she shouldn't have lied about it." I extended my hand. He shook it firm grip, no hesitation. "Make better choices than she did," I said. "I will." They left quietly and the party went on, but the moment stuck with me. The following Monday, I got a call from a state prosecutor named Felicia Raines. She was heading up the case against Penelope and wanted to meet in person. We sat down in a modest office inside the county courthouse. "She's refusing a plea," Raines said, "which is bold considering the evidence. We've got 2 shell companies, 6 forged documents, and a recorded confession from Travis Rollins." "I figured she'd try to bluff her way out," I said. "It's what she does." "Well, we're not bluffing. We're charging her with wire fraud, falsifying governance records, fraudulent disbursement of community funds, and obstruction of justice. Possibly conspiracy, depending on how deep this goes. Any chance she walks? Not a good one." Not only did she forge amendments, but she used them to fine and threaten residents into silence. That's coercion layered on top of everything else. I leaned back in my chair. She tried to turn an entire neighborhood into her personal ATM. "She did more than that," Raines said. "We subpoenaed her financials. She moved part of the embezzled HOA funds into a private trust. That trust was used to secure a down payment on a second property in another county. She was preparing to flee, quietly." I blinked. "You think she was going to walk away and just start over somewhere else?" She already had. The other property was purchased under a different name, her grandmother's maiden name. "We believe she was planning to resign abruptly, blame stress, and disappear before the audit caught up." "Well," I said, "she didn't count on a fishing camera." Raines smiled. "Most criminals trip over their ego. She just tripped faster than most." The trial was scheduled for mid-September. It took less than a week. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the altered meeting minutes, the duplicate payments to non-existent vendors, all of it laid out in court with timestamps, signatures, and witness testimony. Marla testified. So did Calvin, now a reformed board member who openly admitted he'd been too scared to challenge her. Penelope didn't speak once during the proceedings. Not a single word. She sat stiff, hands folded, staring straight ahead like she was watching someone else's life unravel. When the verdict came, it wasn't even close. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month. In the meantime, the judge ordered full restitution and barred her from holding any governance or fiduciary roles in any community association for life. The neighborhood celebrated in quiet ways. Someone staked a "No Tyrants Allowed" sign in front of the community center. Someone else spray-painted "Let the Grass Grow" on the old fine bulletin board before it was taken down for good. At the next HOA meeting, the new board unveiled a revised charter. Transparent oversight, rotating leadership, and an open-door policy for all residents. No more secret amendments, no more blank checks, just accountability. I was offered a seat on the board. I declined. "I think I've done my tour," I said. "Time to let someone else take the wheel," but I didn't disappear. I stayed involved, just not in charge. I helped rebuild the neighborhood watch, started a community newsletter with Marla, and even hosted the first lake cleanup day with a dozen volunteers and a grill full of hot dogs. One afternoon, while hauling driftwood from the far side of the lake, I noticed something strange under one of the larger rocks by the old boat ramp. A small steel box, half buried in silt. I pried it loose and opened it. Inside were dozens of index cards. Each one had a name, a lot number, and a dollar amount. Next to some there were notes. Late fee, no pushback, threat of lien worked. Remind them about fence height. It was a manual, a ledger of manipulation. I turned it over to the authorities. It became part of the sentencing documentation. When Penelope returned for that hearing, she looked different. No makeup, no blazer, just the standardized beige of county jail. The courtroom was packed. Everyone wanted closure. The judge didn't hold back. "Your actions were not merely unethical," he said. "They were calculated, predatory, and deeply corrosive to the fabric of a shared community. You violated the trust of your neighbors, exploited your authority, and attempted to cover your crimes with deceit." He sentenced her to 6 years in state prison with eligibility for parole after 4. Restitution was imposed, and the illegally purchased property was seized. She was led out in cuffs, eyes forward, mouth shut. Afterward, I walked back to the lake, sat on the dock, and watched the sun dip below the trees. The water was still. No wakes, no splashes. Just the distant sound of laughter from a backyard 2 houses over. Behind me, the community moved on, stronger, wiser, united, and for the first time in a long while, I cast my line with nothing pulling me under.